Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm an airline pilot, and today we've got special guest Toto from HOTSTART, and he's been so kind to approach me with a copy of the Challenger 650, arguably one of the best aircraft simulations in any simulator at the moment. Now, we already did a very detailed walk around and the flight deck setup with a lot of great explanations, and today we're back with the setup of our avionics and a little demonstration of how integrated everything is in this little airplane. So you will recall that in the previous video we started uplinking the flight plan, or rather downlinking the flight plan already, but we've got a little datalink flight plan rejected message down here. Now, that was because apparently I misspelled my SimBrief ID to him when we exchanged that information for the video. Now, just after we ended the last recording, Toto showed me something that I couldn't believe when I heard it. So, Toto, could you explain to us exactly what went wrong there and how to fix it?
Yeah, sure. So the problem was you gave me the wrong SimBrief ID, and that's what the simulation sort of behind the scenes uses to fetch the flight plan to interface like with our virtual flight management office. So in order to fix that, I need to go into my user settings and change the flight ID, but the communications management unit inside of the aircraft is already powered on, so it's not going to let me change that SimBrief pilot ID. The data field that for me is right now grayed out in the user settings window. So to get it to do that, we need to basically reboot the CMU, just the communications management unit in the aircraft, not the entire avionics stack. It does tell you in the user settings to power down all the avionics just because it doesn't want to confuse you. But we can actually just do it by pulling a breaker on the breaker panel behind the pilot. So if you look on CDU3 actually, right now we've got the data link status page displayed. It's linked up, it's all ready to go. But if we try to fetch the flight plan through here, it wouldn't actually work. It would give us the data link rejected message again. It would basically time out. So Emmanuel, if you would be so kind as to pull breaker Hotel 9 data link, and
Okay.
that should
Breaker Hotel 9. So, guys, just in general, how do you read a circuit breaker panel? Because it can be quite hard to find something on here. So you've got those ladders over here. You can see we start from Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, Echo, and so on. And down here we're in Hotel. And then we've got numbers down here. So whenever a procedure wants you to pull a breaker, it's going to tell you, like, now, Hotel 9. And look at that, here's the data link breaker. Okay, so I'm pulling that one out.
Yes, and if you look, CDU3 is now showing nothing. In fact, if I go to index and try and access the data link page again, the CMU is not there anymore. It's gone home. So I'm going to change here my flight plan, deleted the SimBrief pilot ID 1 character that I had on there, and you can push the data link breaker back in.
Okay, basically. So that is located just over here again, and it's back in.
Yes, sir. And CMU is going to take a while to boot. Takes about 5 seconds or so. Might give us one more timeout. There it is. Okay. So CMU is booted up. We need to wait for the link status to reinitialize itself because it's gone back into POA and ATN scan. So it's basically now doing the full frequency scan, figure out which VHF data link systems are available. Oh, SATCOM's linked up already, POA COM, so that one's entered. So theoretically, we could fetch the data link, the flight plan over SATCOM. VHF data link scanning takes a little bit longer.
Mm-hmm.
So right now it says, if you look on media VHF, frequency 136.875, and DSB is nothing, it's dashed out. So data service provider is right now nothing. Mm-hmm. So we're waiting for the thing. It's going to take about a minute or two to link up on VHF data link. So we don't have to wait for that. We can just use the SATCOM for the time being. So if you go to again on CDU1, where we had the flight plan uplink, index.
Just quickly reset that. Okay, yep. So you said we go to flight
index.
Plan.
Yeah, index.
Index.
Flight plan, route menu.
Okay, down there it is. Yep, now I'm back
Yes.
in it. I kind of had
Flight
like
plan
30
recall.
seconds flight plan
No problem.
recall.
It still remembers what we had in there for fetch. Okay, and just send it off. Request pending, and in fact, CD3 now is going to say SATCOM in Prague. Well, when it's sending out requests.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now it's downlinking probably, so it's going to take a while. In fact, I can look on my study screen here. Once you're going to be running as the master node, you'd be actually able to see the thing transfer in real time. We do have a study screen. We have 2 SATCOM systems simulated. Yeah, I can see it's pulling 10 kilobits per second from Inmarsat. And it's linked up to satellite I4AF4. So we have 2 SATCOM data link systems simulated. Okay, VHF is already linked up as well. We have 2 SATCOM data link systems simulated. That's Inmarsat and Iridium. It's still request pending, so it's still downloading the flight plan. Depends on how many things, Emmanuel. Ah, there it is. DL flight plan loaded. Okay, so now just push sec flight plan. It's loaded into the secondary always.
Okay.
And we can go and activate it. That'll flip the secondary into our primary and execute.
So tell me, in business aviation, how often is data link actually used, or do pilots
all the time?
Really, all the time?
All the time. Almost nobody keys the flight plan in by hand. It's just tedious.
Wow. Okay. I did absolutely not expect that.
Yeah, it's sort of like people feel like they're cavemen when they have to start re-entering the flight plan manually.
Okay.
So now we just go dep R and select our runway and SID, and that's the flight plan ready to go.
So, just because it might have gotten lost a bit on the previous video, let's just very quickly have a look into how to get the latest weather once again, because it kind of makes sense in this as well. Right, so you said we go to index?
Yes.
Data link.
Weather.
Weather, and then, guys, have a look into the previous video on how you can get real-life HOTAS from the United States here as well if you are not flying on VATSIM. The plane will detect if you are flying on VATSIM, and then you can request VATSIM HOTAS through this as well. But we are flying offline today, and we are in Europe, so real-life HOTAS, not today. There is unfortunately no data provider for that in the real life, so we'll go to weather, and then grab what we are looking for.
Mm-hmm.
This is just an amazing system, isn't it? So I'm gonna grab the departure, and I'll just go for the destination as well.
Yes. Here's a little trick that you might not be used to from MSFS. If you click on the screen of the CDU, it'll pop up into 2D version, and if you click on it again, you get a little flashing keyboard at the top. You can type now with your keyboard.
Oh, lovely. So let's give that a try. Wow. That's cool. That's really cool.
Yeah, if you want to key in stuff fast, you can basically type on here super duper quickly.
Yep. Wow.
Sometimes we meme with it when you've hooked up your Hoppy account for ACAR's data link, you can actually send air-to-air messages to other aircraft this way. So you would go into like data link, air-to-air message, and you can just send each other memes.
Nice. Okay, so let's go ahead and request that. How can I get out of the keyboard again?
Just click away from the window.
Okay.
Or close it. That's also a way to do it.
So we'll send that. And that is usually rather quick, I figured out already.
Yes, sir. So that is our flight plan done. We can go ahead and also do a wind update on the flight plan itself. That'll basically update winds along the flight plan route. That's an index route menu.
Yep. Just let me quickly enter the departure because I interrupted you on that.
No problem.
Alright, so we just got some weather delivered over here. I'm going to grab that down here. And our departure is now giving us 190 at 4. So that's obviously going to be runway 22 for the departure. And then first waypoint is going to be Neves. So let's go ahead and grab a SID to that as well.
Next page, yep.
So that's going to be the Neves 1 Victor departure. Okay.
Good stuff.
And then I'm just going to quickly insert the arrival as well. I do believe it is the ILS Zulu over here. And we are
You don't
going
even have to select an approach. This is like Boeing, not like Airbus. So you can just select a star and leave the approach empty until you know.
Oh, okay. So can we
You just
deselect that?
can't. You just cancel the mod.
Okay. Alright, so we are coming in via Nara. And then it's gonna be the... Well, let's see about that. Maybe we can take a very quick cheat over here and get out the iPad and grab a couple of charts. You can do it on screen as well. We'll have a look at that in a few moments, but... Okay, so arrival, and then we've got Nara. Where is it? Over here it is.
Third and fourth charts I saw had Nara on it.
Yeah. Okay, so Nara to Zulu arrival then. That's gonna be the quickest. Okay.
Yeah, that one's for the, I think, landing south, and then Nara to Alpha or whatever was the one for landing north.
Yep. Okay, cool. So that stuff
Sweet.
is in. Cool.
Good stuff.
So,
And
I interrupted
wind
you
up-
on the wind uplink. Sorry.
No problem. It's under index, also in the route menu. So index route menu again. And at the bottom there it says FPL and wind update. And just send it off and it'll automatically populate the winds in your flight plan legs. And you can just carry on with everything else.
Alright.
So we'll just carry on. Now, takeoff data. The FMC has an integrated takeoff performance calculator. So that's the one we typically use. If you go and you see the perf key under your mouse, when you push that once, it takes you to the thrust limit subpage, and if you push it again, it'll take you to the performance master menu. And then there you've got basically all your performance functions are on here. So just take the takeoff key. Okay, it's got the winds already, so we can just push exec just to execute the winds that have been updated in the flight plan. Yeah, that was just the winds coming in.
Okay.
Good stuff. So you see the FMS automatically pre-populated that we're on runway 22. We're going to have a runway length of however many feet. If you want that in meters, you can actually just put M into the scratch pad and throw it on the runway length, and it'll give it to you in meters. There's also a configuration setting in the airframe manager. You can configure each of your precision airframes to either be metric or imperial. If you want various options for thrust settings and avionics options, that kind of stuff is all selectable in there, and it's kept per airframe.
Very,
Cool.
very nice.
Yep. Cool. So we've got the runway length, runway slope. We could select if we are expecting any kind of special conditions. There's a complicated, again, set of performance manuals for the real thing. This is a whole, I would say, a whole module of performance calculations for the Challenger, because there's like various cases where the performance is one way calculated and another way when when the runway is dry, when it's wet, and that kind of stuff in the other. You've seen your fair share of, I'm sure, spaghetti charts and squiggly charts in performance calculations where you go from one chart to the next to the next to the next with the various conditions. And so the FMC basically has all that data in it, so it just automates that lookup for you. All you need to do is give it the wind and the OAT that you would expect there, and a QNH, I guess.
Alright, perfect. So we've got 190 at 421 degrees, 1007.
It auto computes your headwind and crosswind components,
Cool.
and your pressure altitude. So in fact, those are kind of important, obviously, for crosswind limits and tailwind limits and that kind of stuff. If, for example, if you had excessive tailwind, so let's say we had, I'm just going to temporarily mess around with it and say we had like a 15 knot tailwind. You see that we get amber tail 15, it's maximum 10, and check takeoff perf to let us know that, hey, what you're about to do is probably not the smartest idea.
Okay, is there any trick of what we can do if we've got, for example, variable winds and we just want to enter them as a direct tailwind?
Haha, easy. Just put T and a number and put it into the runway wind component directly.
Okay, so for example, T5.
Yep. There you go.
Very nice.
And if you want to get rid of the manual entry here for the runway winds, just clear delete and delete that line, and it'll recompute it from the automatic winds, or the winds that you've entered for the wind component.
Really cool. Okay.
So go to next page. There's our V speeds. CG, we don't currently simulate CG shift too much with passengers. I need to still finish up a big old Excel spreadsheet to give you all that. So for the time being, just enter something like a 25% CG. That's going to fit us most of the time. And yeah, that'll give us a trim of 5.4. That's good. The V speeds in here, interestingly, are not actually user selectable. Those are always coming from the manual. And so you can either send them as is, or you would use the display control panel if you needed to enter your manual V speeds if you had like an external performance calculator. But for the most part, this should actually give you the V speeds that you need. Make sense?
Okay, absolutely. Now, just wondering about that. I do suppose we still need to enter things like the
Fuel.
gross weight and the
Yes.
passenger numbers?
Yes. I actually skipped an item here that was on the checklist we just passed by. There was item 63, FMS flight plan, wind update, and performance. I forgot to do the performance in it. So just go to the perf master menu and perf in it. Very first one, and there we go. So passengers, we can enter either however many passengers we're going to have, or you can just enter their weight, even gross weight directly if you wanted to, but you typically enter the number of passengers, roughly however many you expect.
Okay, so do you have any nice little shortcut or so to get that information of how much you've actually gotten in your airplane now?
Well, how would a real pilot know? You just know however
Looking
many
back?
passengers. I'm sorry?
Just looking back into the cabin and counting?
Yeah, that's about the only way, or however many people you asked to come from the FBO. That's
Okay.
however many you enter in here, but the weights are not necessarily exactly the same. Passenger weights can actually vary seasonally and locationally. We do vary them a little bit. So I'm trying to basically force people to get away from this notion that whatever they enter into this box is gospel and it's one-to-one correspondence with the physics. Physics and what the flight computers think may not be exactly corresponding to each other. So you have to make a good effort to try and match reality, so to speak, the simulated reality.
Now
Does
that's
it
an
make
important
sense?
thing, guys. Do listen to that because that's exactly the reality. We have certain numbers, but thinking about it from my point of view, from an airline's operation, not every suitcase weighs 13 kilos. Not every passenger weighs 86 kilos together with their hand luggage. So that's exactly it. You normally use some standard weights to compute your weights, but then again, the real numbers can differ from that. You have no way of knowing. The only moment when you know, if your takeoff CG is calculated correctly is when you rotate the plane and then it either goes faster or slower than expected. And that happens all the time.
Yeah, so basically be prepared for a little bit of variation. Give your best estimate in here, and if you've done things right, it should all work out. Now, of course, it's fairly tolerant, you know, airplanes are forgiving of that, so just be reasonable with it.
Yeah, sure. Alright, so I do remember we got like 8 passengers or so.
Yep, good stuff.
Cargo, I don't even remember
I
what
can
we had.
I can actually switch the airplane here over to metric standby. Edit avionics options, and I'm gonna set us over to meters and kilograms if you want that. That should be a little bit more
Okay,
convenient for you.
cool.
And if you want if you want to say that our passengers are heavier than that, you can just enter a slash and whatever number of weight you are used to.
Okay, cool.
Sounds good. Good stuff. Cargo, how much cargo do we expect them to bring along?
Yeah, I mean, 8 people probably have businessmen today, so how about we take some 60 kilos or so? Just a couple of bags.
Sure. Okay.
Alright.
For fuel, you can either manually copy down the value from the fuel gauges, or you can do clear delete and throw it on the line there. That'll take the sensed fuel from the fuel systems, and then it will show sensed fuel for a few seconds, then go back to calc fuel, and then the FMS becomes disconnected again from the fuel gauges, because the fuel gauges tend to slosh around quite a bit. Again, this is all simulated. As you accelerate down the runway, these numbers will vary and go up and down and up and down. Whereas the fuel calculated value in the FMS is based on fuel flow being integrated over time, right? So it's subtracted from a starting value.
Okay.
In fact, you could even enter a value you expect to have after refueling, and that's
Okay.
going to be okay. In fact, what I need to do is I need to actually call Jenny because we've done a few restarts of the sim here, and she hasn't sent hasn't sent the fueler again.
All right. So we'll quickly
Uh,
call for the fuelers,
yep,
but how about we just about finish the avionics setup and then do the
absolutely.
fuel afterwards?
Absolutely, yeah. So we can execute these changes here, I think. You can look on page 2. There's basically just some performance defaults. We can leave those out. We have already entered the flight plan wins, so these are just averages as a fallback. And we can enter a different reserve value. Mind you, reserve is taken as the final reserve, so after the alternate, not like an Airbus where it's a destination reserve.
Okay, so 30 minutes, 45. How much would you usually use for the Challenger?
It really depends. Every operator is different. I know some people are super squeamish and they don't want to fly with anything less than 1.5 hours of minute final reserve. Some people are a little bit more, willy-nilly. I would say 910 kilos is about an hour.
Okay.
So if you go 45 minutes, it would be something like 600 kilos.
All right. So how about we
Uh,
take that? With
yes,
600
and
kilos, technically, we don't even need to refuel anymore.
yes, but we can take a little bit extra just to be safe.
Yeah,
Um,
certainly.
Also, let me think here. There's also a way to enter. So many of these values are copied at the start of a new flight plan, which is initiated when you enter a new origin point. The defaults are actually an index defaults, and many of that you can basically change all of those settings, and they will stay with the airframe
Mm-hmm.
for any subsequent flights, so that you don't have to re-enter those and change them again. Good stuff. Just go to VNAV setup quickly. Um, let's see. Our target climb speed. This is the default. The way that the airplane comes from the factory, it's set up very conservatively. I think we can go faster than that. But
Oh,
let's put
yeah.
in 300 and Mach 0.78 for climb. Yep. For the next step, next page, that'll be our cruise performance. Yeah, 300 Mach 80 is good. And descent. Next page, and Mach 80 and 300 again for descent. Let's zoom here.
Okay.
Cool. And transition flight levels and altitudes you can set up however you want. One thing that's kind of interesting about the flight VNAV system in the Challenger is that it does not use what they call idle power descent. It uses a constant angle descent. So that's what that VPA line there is. It basically constructs a constant angle descent from the destination runway backwards. 3 degrees is achievable on most days if you're not too heavy and there's not in certain unfavorable conditions. Some operators fly a shallower descent like 2.5, 2.1, 2.6, something like that.
Captain. Fuel truck is
Ah,
hooked up. Just let me know how much
fueler is
fuel you
there.
need. Or would you like to go tanks full today?
So I would say we need, let's take on another 500 kilos, something like that.
Yep.
So you
So,
can roll your mouse up on there or use that.
oh,
Or
yeah.
yeah, something like 700 liters. That'll do.
Okay, yeah. So we've got it in liters up there. Obviously, our fuel gauge is in kilos, so that's something that we always have to deal with. And it's basically quite easy to transfer it. I mean, if you've got 680 liters, then just multiply it with 0.81, and then you've got it in kilos. So that is how you can easily calculate what you need there.
Yeah, and the fuel density, by the way, given by the fueler for you, is dependent on the temperature and the location. So different refineries have different crude oil, and when it's very hot or very cold, the density will vary.
Cool. Alright,
Cool.
so I would say let's just about take 1,000 liters over
Okay.
here.
Sounds good.
Because I do recall from last time where I handled the panel up here a little bit that there is a
Mhm.
little bit of lag in there. And
Oh yeah, there's a
I,
lot of lag.
oh yeah, and I found that really cool. On the 737, we had exactly the same thing. And now try to fuel the airplane up accurately. Okay, cool.
Okay.
So we're gonna
Yep.
go
Just
pump 4,000 liters.
yep.
All right. I'm gonna go start up the pump.
Right, so now he's going to walk out to the fuel truck and hit the dead man switch, and he's going to start his pump. On our side, what we need to do is come up to the fuel refuel defuel panel. We'll put it up into fuel mode, so you can go ahead and flip the switch on the master switch on the left side there to fuel mode. Okay, and we'll want to probably give a little bit more fuel into the right tank. Right tank is where the APU burns from, and we've been running it for a while, so flip, for the time being, you know what, flip both the outboard, the left and right main switches to open. As soon as they go to open, as soon as the truck starts applying pressure, right? Then we do a quick shut-off test, so we'll push the shut-off test button. That's just a test that the high-level switches are going to stop if we've reached the full fuel. Okay, good. Let go, and I would now turn off the left switch for a little bit, just to give a little bit more fuel coming into the right. We'll wait until, I don't know, it reads like 900, 920, something like that, until it reads a little bit more, basically, and then we will be, with the lag, you know, because these indications are fairly delayed, we'll be sure that the right side is quite a bit closer to the left side. We are allowed up to 180 kilo weight differential between left and right for takeoff, but, you know, why have a huge differential when we don't have to?
Absolutely.
Okay, and I think you can now switch on the left side as well, and we should be good.
Yep.
Good, and we can now focus on the rest of the FMS. He's going to take his time to refuel.
All right.
Empty.
I just want to look at this for a little second there, so that you guys can actually see it. Like, you can see the left side is going a little bit slower than the right side now, and you know, like that, the fueler, or rather you over here in the 737, it was always the refueling operator and not the pilot. And you kind of need to guess a little bit, like, okay, now I need to pump a little bit, and then it's gonna run, through. And that was actually quite fun, even more so when you had to do some manual fuel balancing, because the fuel gauges in the front are just as delayed. Is that the case in the Challenger as well?
Oh yeah.
All right, so fuel balancing actually is fun in here.
Oh yeah.
Okay, cool. So that's just something that
we overshot by about 30 kilos. Close enough.
Yeah. So at what rate does it actually refill?
And
What?
he's done pumping.
Okay.
Sorry, you cut out there for a little bit. At what rate does it what?
Yeah, at what rate does the airplane actually refuel? Like how many kilos per tank per minute or so?
So I'm trying to remember now. We're completely empty to completely full. It takes about a half hour, but that is mostly because of the tail tank takes so freaking long. It's very, very slow to refuel the tail. Typically,
Refueling is complete, Captain. Do you
I would
need
say
anything
maybe.
else?
I don't think we need anything. Yeah, we can go ahead and
No, we can
disconnect.
Okay, just one quick signature on here, and I'll be on my way.
And you can just give him a signature there.
Wow, that actually
Here's a
looks,
copy for your
for
record.
riding with the mouse.
Have a nice day.
Very nicely done. Yep, and we can switch all of these back off. Yep, and the switch is on the panel. Cool, good stuff.
All right.
Refueling takes, if I remember right, it's when all 4 tanks are being filled at the same time. It's about 250 gallons a minute, I think, or is it 150? No, it's more like 160 gallons a minute. Yeah. Which is 600 liters a minute, so called 500 kilos a minute, give or take. That's when all 4 tanks are being filled. When you're only filling the mains, it might be more like 400 kilos a minute. So, give or take, if you just want to fill the wings from completely empty to completely full, which is about 4.5 tons, it'll be about 10 minutes.
Okay. All right, so like that, you know, you can do a little bit of calculation as well. Like, okay, I need so many more kilos, so how long should it take approximately? And then you just, the tank valves like that, I suppose.
Yes. And it's not as smart as a fully automated refuel system where you just give it a quantity. It's a little bit dumber, but the fueler is going to make sure that he doesn't overpump too much.
Yep.
Good stuff.
All right.
So takeoff data. So we've now entered our perf init, so that's all done. So we can now go ahead and go back into the perf master menu, go to takeoff, and now it will already have our weights in the second page. The gross weight, TOW, so takeoff weight is now correct, 15.1 tons. And takeoff field length, we need 1,087 meters. Engine bleeds, typically we would take off either on APU. Some companies operate it on the engines, which would be 10th. That's the 10th stage bleed system. If you want to run the bleeds on the engines, that's fine, or the packs basically.
Okay. Well, I suppose if you say most operators are using APU, then that's what we're going to do today.
Okay. Well, in that case, set it to off.
Yep.
And yeah, we can send those speeds, so they'll populate on the PFD.
So the cowl is probably the cowl anti-ice on?
Yes.
And wing and cowl anti-ice, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay.
You cannot use pressurization plus anti-ice for takeoff and landing. Those are not allowed. It's either nothing on the engines, or pressurization on the engines, or anti-ice on the engines. Those are the only available configurations.
Okay.
Pages 3 and 4 on here will give you additional overweight condition information if you're over limits. So for example, you could enter like obstacle heights and distances, and it'll give you a climb gradient and that kind of stuff. It's a fairly rudimentary obstacle analysis tool. It's not as sophisticated as what you have like on like high performance obstacle analysis systems. And then we also have what the limiting. That's a weird thing on the Challenger is it will not only give you your V speeds and runway required. It will actually tell you if you are overweight, which of your weight limits you've exceeded. So if, for example, you cannot make a climb requirement, it will reduce the virtual, so to speak, maximum weight to meet your climb performance requirement and give you a weight. And if you're over that weight, it'll tell you by how much.
Okay.
Makes sense?
Absolutely. So do you have options to manipulate when you are, for example, above a climb limit? Like, can you tell it, okay, I want to use a different flap setting or something the likes?
Yeah, so we can just play around with it. I'm going to go into the takeoff setting here on the right-hand CDU, and I can manually, and most of these fields you can actually manually change, and we can play around with some performance conditions. So say, for instance, our runway is still 3,200 meters long, but it's not at a pressure altitude of 500 feet, but it's a pressure altitude of 9,500 feet. And you'll see, it's going to say V-speeds deselected, and you can see right now how our performance has changed on page 4. So we are now quite heavily climb performance limited. Before it was like 25 tons, which is over our structural weight limit. But now we are not actually able to go. Let's say that we have a long range flight. We want to take off with as much fuel as we can, which is about 9,000 kilos in the aircraft, right? So we're going to go fully packed, long distance flight. We're going to go 3,000 miles, 8-hour flight. If I put that in, you'll see that all of a sudden, problem. Check takeoff perf, and if you go to page 2, we are now actually, hang on, that's over the structural weight limit. Let me actually put in a little bit less, like 8,500 kilos. And we are just about takeoff weight 21.8 tons. That's just about max takeoff weight structurally, but we are 2.7 tons overweight for the max takeoff weight by performance. And if we look on page 4, it's going to basically be able to tell us which one we've exceeded, or it's going to show us that, hey, yeah, the runway length limit is the one that's most limiting for us today. Mm-hmm. We would not actually be able to fit it onto the runway that we're trying to do it from. And it's even going to tell us the takeoff field length required. And the Challenger is certified up to 14,500 feet pressure altitude elevation for takeoff and landing. But at that point, you are heavily, heavily limited. It's basically right on the edge of what's possible with the airplane.
Okay, and do we have any options to manipulate? Like, okay, I've got these given conditions, and can I change, for example, the flap setting I want to use for the takeoff? Or can I...
No, flap setting is only flaps 20 for takeoff, so that's the one thing that we don't have to change, or don't change. But the selections that are available for you to change is, for example, the automatic performance reserve, the APR selection here. The runway condition is going to massively affect however much weight you can take. So say, for instance, we are at 6,500 feet, but it is, let's say, -5 degrees outside. well, 5,500 feet or something like that. That's like Denver, right? So it's Colorado,
Mm-hmm.
winter time. But it's not dry conditions. It's eighth of an inch slush. And now we are limited by runway length
Yep.
because we would not be able to stop until the V1 condition at V1. Basically, if we had to do a takeoff aboard.
And that was an easy 2 tons of weight gone there. Like, imagine now if we had to take 2 tons less fuel because the payload is not up to negotiation. So 2 tons of fuel, how long could the plane fly on that?
2 tons is about 4 hours.
Wow.
Well, no, hang on. Sorry. It's about like 2.5 hours.
Even that. I mean, if you think about it, just that little bit of contamination on the runway takes away 2.5 flight hours. Now, that is exactly where that performance theory comes in so handy. I know that a lot of flight simmers are so accustomed to just taking the EFB on the Phoenix, and just type in autofill, 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 and then it gives you some takeoff weights. And you are basically never limited because, on typical A320 operations, you just aren't that limited unless you really go for conditions like we just did, high altitude, contaminated runway, and so on. And all of a sudden, you can see, however, how much of a difference it can actually make there, and how much of an impact that can have on your flight.
Yep. We can absolutely get into a case where it's not, for example, in this case, it's not necessarily a problem if we were just to take off, right? It's the runway length limit is calculated from the worst of the accelerate go and accelerate stop distances. So if, for example, if we were just trying to take off and we were this heavy, most likely we would be able to take off in much less than 3,200 meters. But what if we had like an engine failure before V1 and we decide to reject? Then we might not actually be able to have enough runway length to stop, or braking action basically to stop.
Yep.
And it gets really severe if you get to like ice and things like thrust reverser inoperative.
Mm-hmm.
Then we are then the thing. In fact, thrust reverser inoperative and ice, I think, is not even allowed. So it's just going to get a question mark and throw its hands up and say, "I have no idea."
Yep. Okay.
There we go. Ice and thrust reversers operative, 4,400 meters. You basically don't have braking action.
Yeah, look at that difference between V1 and VR. Like over here, you literally have 116 knots V1, but then your VR is like 30 knots more. Imagine if at exactly 116 you have an engine failure, and all of a sudden on a single engine you need to accelerate another 30 knots before you can rotate.
Yeah, we can even fake the runway length, so to speak, just to get the thing to stop squawking at us. But yes, that's 32 knots of extra acceleration you have to keep on the runway.
Yep. And that on a single engine, and in the worst case, imagine you have like an engine fire. You're not supposed, I mean, at least on the 737 and the Airbus, I'm not sure how it is on the Challenger, but you're not supposed to do anything until you reach 400 feet. Now imagine how long that is going to take until you can actually start fighting the fire.
It's going to feel like an eternity. It's the same in the Challenger, by the way, yeah.
Okay. Wow.
So yes, it does get fairly hairy, and yeah, you can simulate these conditions. You can set failures. If you go into the failure menu in, let's see, flight edit failures in the top bar menu, you can actually play around with our custom failure manager on the aircraft.
You know we'll have to do that one day, do you?
Absolutely.
We absolutely need to.
I am counting on it. So if you go back, delete these numbers, and put them back to where they were, we're back in our happy place.
Okay.
And back out of ice, dry conditions, and I'm gonna have to reset the weights here. So clear, delete, and pull the sensed values back out of the sensors. And there we are. All good.
All right.
Okay, takeoff data is finally set.
Yeah.
This is taken forever.
Yeah.
Avionics and charts.
Alright, so next thing for us then, avionics setup. Now, obviously a lot of us guys coming from the airlines will be like, I want a big navigation display, I want a big engine display. How on earth do I set those avionics up? What would you recommend? what would be a good way to use the display space we have available?
So the typical way to set it up, first of all, you can get rid of MFD data. So push MFD data on the CDU again to get rid of on your side, so it shows the map again. So we don't need that anymore. There we go. Yeah, so typical way to set up your displays on the flying side is you would have the rose mode displays, what they call this little the HSI, on the PFD, on the PFD, on the attitude display, you would typically select on the ProLine 21 Advanced synthetic vision. So you can bring that up on the DCP if you, on display control panel, the little one, you push menu,
Right,
the
so
little
that's
one. Yeah.
the little one, yeah.
Yeah, if you go push menu, and just roll the inner knob there, one to the right. That's the outer knob. The inner knob is the one, there you go. It's two concentric knobs. There you go.
Okay.
And that is gonna give you your synthetic vision. And you can also switch if you're. I know a lot of folks don't like the inverted V, the V bar display for the flight director. So you can go to grab the outer knob there, roll down to config. Just push the center of the knob. There you go. And then you can go down a little more, and that roll the inner knob, and that's going to give you cross pointer. There you go.
Oh yeah.
So now if we go and select, yeah, in fact, by the way, you can shrink the yoke. That's a slightly helpful thing. If you push on the base of it.
Oh yeah, that is certainly helpful. Okay.
You can session to simulation.
Yeah, I mean in real life, you know, you want to see something, you just move your head a tiny bit, and then you can see everything. In flight simulation, unfortunately, things are a little bit more difficult, so that's always much appreciated if we have options like these.
Yes. On the left side, you'd also sometimes select like terrain, so just the TRWX button there, push it once, and that's going to give you your terrain mode display. You might want to. The right-hand knob on that panel is your range, so the inner knob is the range selection. If you roll that up a little bit, it controls both screens at the same time, and that's going to give you your range setup how you want it. Sometimes you'd also want to see traffic, so that's a TFC button. And right now it's TCAS is off, but that's fine. That's just telling us, hey, we're going to show you traffic if there's anybody alive, and that's going to work with VATSIM as well as Pilot Edge, no problem. The format button just switches between this display, the HSI display, and what they call a PPAWS, basically just another flight plan line. So if you want to, for example, if you want to use the MFD to display some system synoptics, but you still want to be able to see your flight plan line and the map, that's the format lets you do that.
Okay.
So this is typically how people want to have it set up. And yeah, I'm going to leave it on default as well, just the same. Charts. Charts are, right now you have the ICAS on your side, so I'm going to have charts on my side. It's done with the CCP charts button, so it's over that guy. Yeah, that panel. It's on the right bottom, on the upper right there. Just push chart, and it should bring up. There we go. There's our current chart.
Let's just about move over a little bit, and maybe once again, because in the previous video it might have gotten lost a bit. So we've got it on the right-hand side now. What do we do if we want to have it on the left-hand side?
Yeah, so on the left-hand side, if you push the chart button, it's just going to say selection inactive. That's because the ICAS has to be displayed somewhere, the engine indications, right, basically. So we have to go to the back of the pedestal, and on the reversionary mode switch, there's like a series of knobs in the middle that says a bunch of like display reconfigurations if there's a problem with the aircraft, right, or the avionics. And there's a big button in the center called ICAS that lets us move the ICAS to a different display. You can move it either to the right or onto both PFDs. And with that in hand, we would be able to move the ICAS off somewhere else, and then we'd be able to use the left MFD for whatever. So typically, the pilot flying we're gonna have the ICAS on that person's side. And the pilot not flying was going to have the charts and other various displays. Another possibility is to set it to both PFDs, that's going to come in handy because then both pilots can display charts, and it's often used for like taxiing. Like if you're taxiing, we're going to move the selection to both PFDs, and we're going to bring up the taxi chart on your side, so you'd be able to like just glance over if you want to know where you are, where you're going, and that kind of stuff. We'll turn down the brightness a little bit. Good stuff. And
Okay, so just to show people that once again, let's return that to normal. So that's our normal view. And now what we can do, we basically move the engine instruments, that's the ICAS, to the PFD, like so. And now we can pull up the charts over here, like so. And all of a sudden, you got the taxi charts available on here. Okay.
yes, sir. And there's a little trick to help manipulate the charts a little bit more easily. Normally, you'd grab the little joystick that's on the cursor control panel. Yeah, that gets a little bit fiddly in the simulator. So we have a simplification there. If you pop up the screen for the MFD, you can right click and drag on the screen, and that will manipulate the joystick, and mouse wheel in and mouse wheel out will operate the zoom system on the chart. There's only 2 levels of zoom. I don't know why, but Collins thought that that's all the zoom you need. So that's how this works. And yes, the charts are geo-referenced if you have NavGraph charts. We also have charts supported from the FAA. For FAA regions, those are for free. And auto-router charts for European charts, those are also for free, but those do not have geo-referencing. NavGraph provides worldwide coverage and geo-reference, but that's a paid service. Somebody likes it, somebody doesn't. It's your choice. You can set it up how you really want.
Personally, I'm a big fan of NaviGraph charts because it simplifies what you have, because every single country's AIP looks different. So if you fly between 5 countries on a single day, now that's going to be a very busy day for a business jet pilot, but still, let's say it does happen to you, then you fly between 5 countries, you're going to have 5 different chart layouts, and probably a 6th because you will be looking at an alternate somewhere in a different country as well. So, that's where NaviGraph charts really come in handy, and that is why there are chart providers like JAPAS and Lido, NavBlue, and so on in the real life, which airlines pay millions to in order to get unified charts for the entirety of the world.
Yes. There's, in fact, you can even customize the charts a little bit here. So if you on the CCP, you could bring up like the upper menu key. That's gonna bring up your like master menu for the charts, and then you can play around with various settings, like select which chart you want. The outer knob will move between charts, and the inner knob will change the chart that's displayed there. You can switch to day and night mode, and that kind of stuff.
Okay, now I'm just curious what that approach chart view split is.
That's when you select an approach. You'd have to have a chart there, but it's fine. You can just roll it out to the approach chart, or that. Yep. Pick whichever approach. And what that does is the system tries to then automatically guess. It's not downloading chart for you. It picked up for me. Huh. Weird.
Okay, interesting. Or maybe my internet is a little bit bad at the moment. Could well imagine that.
Interesting, yeah. Yeah, whatever.
Okay, well, we're just going to take something over here. Like that.
This chart split view only works on approach charts. What it does, you can pick an approach on here on the FMS, and that'll do it. That'll pick something for us. Sure.
Okay, here we go.
And now I go to upper menu again. And roll it down to the approach chart. Good stuff. And what that does is it tries to compactify the display so you don't have to zoom around. Yeah, there you go to split. Yeah, you can hit escape to get out of the menu. And so what that does is it tries to break up the chart into discrete sections. It gets a little bit confusing because it looks in the night mode you don't quite see the borders between the regions there. You can see that it's got like a plan view section at the top that's always available, and then you've got 3 selectable subviews that are just with no selection on the knob, just the inner knob. If you just move that, the outer knob, here, if you roll that, it will switch between briefing, profile, and minimums quickly.
Now
you don't
that
have
is
to-
really great.
So you
That is
don't have
great.
Yeah, that way you don't have to move between menus or play around with the joystick and that kind of stuff, or play around with the zoom button. You've got everything displayed that you need. So for briefing, you just stay on here on briefing. As you start the approach, you go to profile, you stay there, and as soon as you hit toga, it would actually automatically go to minimums. If we were in go around mode, it would automatically switch you over to the minimums, which is where normally, or hang on, or is it? No, there's the briefing strip, right? There we go back to briefing because that's where your missed approach briefing is.
Wow.
So
Now,
it tries to do the reasonable thing.
yep. And that is just about something, that I totally love about differences between what we see in most flight simulation add-ons and what we see in the really good ones. Now, these little things of logic there, in real aviation, we have dozens of those. And most flight simulation add-ons tend to leave them out, but that is really where those high fidelity add-ons do absolutely shine.
Good stuff. Alrighty. So we got avionics and charts set up, I believe.
Yep.
Good. So I'm going to check that checklist item.
Okay.
Flight instrument check. I think we can go back to normal displays here. So back to ICAS on the left. Good. Okay. So flight instruments check. There's a whole spiel of how you're supposed to do the flight instrument check. Every company does it a little bit differently. Bombardier recommended, I think, method is to go what they call an inverted U. So you would start at the basically like the heading display, and then you'd go down to the left and then do an upside down U around the screen. So I would go, if you were, or if I were doing the flight instrument check, I would say I'm showing heading 219, pre-select, and we'd roll pre-select to our initial selected heading, I guess, like that or something. So I've got heading 219, a pre-select 222. I am navigating on FMS 2. Direct track, desired track is 222 to Zulu Alpha 901, 5.6 miles to go. So basically you're checking that makes sense on your end as well. Then I'm going to go up. I've got V1 114, VR 121, V2 132, VT 152. VT is, by the way, our flaps up clean speed single engine in case we have an engine out.
Okay.
So basically we'd accelerate to that clean up and then continue the climb. Then we go up, up, up. We've got our pre-select speed. Typically we would select 200 knots unless there is a constraint on the departure, in which case I'm pretty sure there is, there isn't actually today. So we can go ahead and select select 200. Oh, sorry, select 200 knots here. It's a little bit different than a Boeing. You don't select V2 here. You select the sort of a reasonable target because the Challenger accelerates so fast. You're going to be there before you know it.
Okay. Is there any way to have that controlled by the FMS, or is that always, let's call it manual control?
There is.
Okay.
There is. Once we're in the air, you can select VNav on and give the speed control to the FMS, and it will take over.
Okay, we don't want to take away too much for the upcoming videos, but just to show where that's to be found. Now that is on down here, isn't it?
Yes, VNav plan speed. Yeah, as soon as if I were to put VNav on, that's going to complain a little bit, but I'm just going to give it a altitude constraint there. If we wanted to, we could give it like now. If you push resume 250, it would go to the speed bug will go to magenta. You can go ahead and push it. So the speed bug is now going to go magenta and say that now the FMS is controlling the speed pre-selector. If I roll the pre-selector manually on the autopilot panel, it's going to go blue again to indicate that hey, it's a manually pilot selected value again. So the FMS is now locked out again.
Alright, and I do suppose that VNav plan speed is continuously being updated then based on what we put into the VNav setup, is it?
Exactly, because we are right now below 10,000, so it's 250. As soon as we go above 10,000, it's going to go 300 or Mach 70, whichever is slower.
How many speed to altitude limits can I insert over here, and is that going to take flight plan constraints into account as well?
Yes, it will take flight plan constraints in. Speed altitude limits manually only 2 maximum. Typically, you'd only need 1 really. And it will auto-sequence based on leg constraints. So say, for instance, I'm going to bring up here on legs, and I'm going to say we have a limit of 185 to Zulu Alpha 901. So I'm going to enter speed 185, execute, and now if you go to the to the VNAV's plan speed, you'll see it's going to default to 185.
Oh,
So with
perfect.
VNAV, and as soon as we pass that waypoint abeam, we would get 250, and the thing would speed up.
Alright, so I'm transitioning to an Airbus. That means I want to touch as little things as possible. So would it be an idea over here to go into the VNAV setup and then maybe into something like, okay, I want to maintain 200 knots until a certain altitude or something, and then just put it into VNAV straight away for the takeoff?
That is normally not the way we do it. VNAV directly on takeoff is not the way we use. It's only selected after we pass at least, I think, 400 feet.
Okay.
It's not as automated, I guess, as an Airbus.
Yeah,
Sorry
okay.
about that. What you can do, however, is on the autopilot panel. Right now, you'll see. Hang on. What I've done is there's on the thrust levers. There's the auto thrust disconnect is on the. Strangely enough, it's not the side buttons; it's the forward buttons. It's exactly backwards to the. The buttons are on the front of the thrust levers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, ATS disc. But if you roll your head around, there they are. That's the auto throttle disconnects. So if I push that, that actually kills the thrust, the auto throttles, if there are any. And if I push toga again, this is the side buttons are actually togas. So it's
Okay.
exactly back to front to a Boeing.
Well, I can tell you exactly what's going to happen if you've got a guy transitioning from a 737 onto the Challenger or the other way around.
Yeah, it happened in real life. Don't worry.
Yeah.
And what we can also do is we can now pre-arm nav mode. So if you push nav on the autopilot panel, it will show nav in amber. I'm sorry, in white. So we got LNAV pre-armed, altitude select pre-armed. And what are we going to say that our initial climb altitude is, like 5,000 or something?
Yeah.
Does that sound reasonable?
Let's see if we can quickly get out the departure chart there.
Is there
something on it?
You can just roll the inner knob, and that will change to the next chart in the list. The inner knob. Yeah, there we go.
Oh, that's great. Okay, so 6,000 it is.
6,000 it is. Alrighty. And let me. Okay, we've kind of interrupted the flight instrument check here, so I'm going to redo the flight instrument check, and we're going to basically take it all from the top.
Yeah, last thing there to do is just about the QNH 1007.
So each of us sets our own QNH. See how's underlined there? That was when we were out of sync from each other. Yeah. So the airplane has a built-in instrument comparator. Yes. In fact, yeah, that disconnected the synthetic vision system.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, if the QNH is significantly misset between the left and right sides, the synthetic vision system is going to say nope, because there's only one synthetic vision computer on board, which shows the synthetic vision system image to both pilots at the same time. So it's always coming from one source.
Mm-hmm.
So both sides have to agree, and the barometric altitude is what's used for the synthetic vision. So it has to be within limits, otherwise it's just going to say nope.
All right.
In order not to confuse you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, It does make sense. Imagine if you had on one side 1,000 foot higher synthetic vision than on the other. I can see how that could go southbound very quickly.
Yes. Cool. So, flight instrument check. We've got heading 219, pre-select 222. I'm on FMS 2, desired track 222. Zulu Alpha 901, 5.6 miles to run. V1 114, VR 121, VR V2 132, and VT 152. Preset speed 200. I've got takeoff, LNAV 2 in white, altitude select in white. We're going up to 6,000 feet. I've got QNH 1007, and vertical speed is 0. And compared to your side?
Okay, I've got heading 219, pre-select 222, FMS 1, direct track 222 towards Zulu Alpha 901. 5.6 nautical miles, V1 114, VR 121, V2 132, VG 152, pre-select speed 200, Toga, LNAV 1 out in wide, pre-selected 6,000 feet, and altimeter reading 180, vertical speed 0.
Yep. Cool. And you don't have to repeat everything. You can just say that if it checks out on your side, that's okay. But as practice, it's good to know what it is. And it's basically it's a really kind of a spiral that you do around the PFD.
Mm-hmm.
Good stuff. So with that out of the way, departure brief. Right. Finally.
All right. Just the last thing over here before we actually get to that. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
That's the navigation display we've got down here, because we can make a couple of selections on here as well, can we? Like if we go to the display menu.
Yeah, display menu is always context sensitive to what you have on the MFD.
Mm-hmm. So over here, now I'm an airline guy. I do like my airports, speed and altitude constraints.
Yep.
And then maybe on the window, VNAV for takeoff. Is that something you would use? Or?
Typically, pilot flying would have the VNAV part. I'm going to show you what it looks like on my side. When you have it set to on. Hang on, I misclicked here. When I have it set to on, that's typically the way the pilot not flying would have it. Hang on, FLT go away. So this is more of a strategic overview. You could think of this as more the LNAV style of display.
Yep.
This is the VNAV style of display, and this is off. So this is sort of a long-term view, because we see the destination, the expected gross weight at the destination, and the fuel. Whereas on your side, you have the vertical information for the nearest few waypoints, and that is sort of relevant to you for flying purposes.
Okay.
For immediate descents and climbs and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I do suppose it is possible to use terrain on the PFD and then weather on the other display?
Yes. You can, on the CCP, there's a separate set of buttons. You can select... on the CCP, you've got another set of TR, WX, and TFC buttons, so you can select those yourself.
All right. So when I select weather on here, is that automatically turning on the weather radar, or?
Currently, weather radar isn't simulated because we don't have the data from X-Plane.
Okay, sounds somewhat familiar to somebody coming from Microsoft.
Yeah, a little bit. We're trying to get them to do it to get us the data for that, but yeah.
Yeah. And the LX down here, is that lightning?
Yes, that'll be a lightning detector.
Okay, cool.
Storm scope, as they call it.
Yep. Alright, so probably going to use terrain of both then.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So...
Can you give me a 5-minute break? I need to step away for a little bit.
Yeah, sure thing. Ultimately, just looking at this, we've just got the briefings to go, so this is basically the avionics setup completed, is it?
That is correct, yes.
Alright, so we're gonna cut the video over here. Ultimately, it turned out into about an hour from what I initially thought would be 10 minutes, but there's just so much to say about this plane, so thank you very much for watching, everyone, and I hope to see you all again on the next one. If you liked the video, do leave a like, as it does help with the YouTube algorithms, and leave a comment to let me know what you think about this, and if you think that we left out on anything. Thank you very much for watching. Subscribe to the channel for more videos to come, and I see you all again on the next one.